So God bless everyone. Um, tonight, I'm going to be talking about doing the right thing, and just so you guys can remember and see how we're kind of progressing through these teachings. Last week we talked about the values-driven life, or sorry, the main topic is the values-driven life, and last week was letting your values do the driving. And basically, just to sum it up, it was about where your priorities are, um, reassuring us and teaching us that our main focus and our one most important thing in our life should be Jesus. You know, to come to Him, to spend time with Him in His Word, in His presence, just to spend more time with Jesus to become like Him, and then everything else, all of our other responsibilities, everything else that we value, like going to work, going to school, getting good grades, that all of that comes secondary, and it comes after following Jesus and getting to just coming to Jesus' feet. So this week we're going to talk about staying true to your values, and this topic it's kind of related to what we've been preaching about this whole last year about the path to purity. Um, or the book talked about doing the right thing, and I kind of interpreted this chapter as staying pure and staying true to what you believe. So our values are things that. Uh, what we know is right, things that we ought to do, and we're also going to talk about what happens when we act against our beliefs and like our core values. So, doing the right thing. The Bible is God's word, and it gives us instructions. It shows us how we should live, how we should treat one another, how we should um, behave, how we should love one another. But it also teaches us. It teaches us how to grow spiritually, emotionally, physically, as a person, as a child of God, and it also teaches us things that we shouldn't do. The closer we draw to God and read His Word, the better understanding we're going to have, the better understanding we will have of His will for our lives, and the more that we're going to become like Him. So if we invest time with God, and the more we invest time with God, the more we're going to know His will, and then we're going to be encouraged to behave and act more like Jesus, to do things that Jesus did, um, to love like He did, and also to do the right thing. So to demonstrate what happens when we act outside of our beliefs, the author in this book uses the example of lying, and we all know, or as all of us have experienced, when we lie, we tend to, or our body produces an emotion, and it produces like a response where we're kind of, our heart rate can increase. We start to sweat. We start to get really nervous because we know that we're not saying the truth, and we're trying to. Most of the time, we lie to gain something or to hide something, or uh, when we do it, we know that it's not right, and lying isn't good. It's never good to do. It's something produced by the tongue, and as the Bible mentions and teaches us, the tongue is a very powerful, very dangerous, and destructive weapon. Um, and despite this, lying is something that we do all the time, or not all the time, but it's something that we do often that we should try to avoid and stray away from. So when we lie, we tend to get, like I mentioned, this exhilarating feeling where our heart rate goes up, we begin to sweat, and sometimes or in extreme cases, when we start to lie, like we fumble our words, we don't know how to talk, and like we forget how to breathe sometimes, and it just produces a weird physical and emotional response in our bodies. So, in the same way, when we sin and act outside of our beliefs and our values, we get the same exhilarating feeling. At first, it seems fun and like not appetizing, appealing. When we sin and we're doing something that we know is wrong, we get that exhilarating feeling, and we're doing and partaking in activities that the world offers. Um, but like lying, sin comes with its consequences. It has its drawbacks, and if we see and we look at the example in Proverbs chapter 7, it's basically speaking about an immoral woman. So there's this immoral woman that's she has her house, and she sees a young man walking by, and when the young man approaches her or crosses by her house, she goes to him and she starts selling him. She gives him this really beautiful like speech and just tries to seduce this young man by saying just a bunch of like pretty and beautiful words. And this is parallel to sin in the way that it looks appealing, and it tries to draw our attention to it. It tries to draw us closer to it. But if later on, like you read the whole chapter of Proverbs 7, it says that uh, her house is the road to the grave, and as we know, the punishment of sin is death, and that's what it's referring to in the sense that the path to her house leads to grave, because it's going to cause us to sin and cause us to do these things that we shouldn't do, that we know are wrong. But as we all know, there's no condemnation for those that are in Christ. You know, we are in Christ. We are His sons and daughters. We are His children. So now, the book mentions about compromising your beliefs and values for financial survival, and the examples that they use is, trying to lie and trying to do these manipulative and dirty things so that you can get a promotion or keep growing and increasing your status and get to the top. And although, I'm going to touch on that a little bit on later, but how I want to take this in a direction that's kind of more relatable to us, just because we're more, or some of you haven't experienced working yet, or many of us aren't in our careers. So I'm going to be talking about social survival. So we've all had an experience in our schools, elementary, middle, high school, and even in college where some of us are right now. A lot of us, what we want to do, and we see other people do as well, is that they want to fit in. So they want to fit into a certain group and also like be a certain status. And to do that, sometimes not a victim. I'm a culprit of doing this myself and seeing other people do this as well. When we want to be a part of a certain group and be in a certain status, we do things that contradict our beliefs and our core values. And we do things that we normally wouldn't accept, but we do them just so that we can be a part of that group and gain the status and gain respect and gain friends, or start, being more socially acceptable by everyone else. And while I was in high school, I saw this in the life of a friend that I have. And I remember when we were in our freshman year in ninth grade, we were, everyone grows up and everyone experiences different things, and people grow apart and people just grow in different ways. So I remember when we were friends, and we are still friends, but I remember going into freshman year, he was, a short kid. He looked very innocent. He presented himself really well. He would always come to school in dress pants and a buttoned-up shirt. Would always wear or bring all of his necessary tools and things that he needed for school in his backpack. And he was very respectful, a very, very kind and innocent boy. But I saw him changing as we would grow and live through high school. I saw him changing because he wanted to be accepted, and I noticed that he never really felt like as the person that he was then, he didn't really fit in with any type of group. So I remember in one class there was a certain group of people that were in there, and they were already an established friend group. He noticed that in class they would always laugh, they would always seem to have a good time, and he felt like he was missing out because he would just notice them doing their like shenanigans or behaving differently, and he wanted some of that. So he tried to draw closer to them and be a part of their group. And this particular group, an activity that they really liked to do was vape. Just use vape pods. They would vape nicotine and a bunch of stuff. And in order for him to be accepted into that so-called friend group, they peer pressured him and told him, hey, if you want to be a part of our group, you have to, smoke this with us. And I saw him and I tried to tell him, this isn't good for you. Like, if you go down this path, it can only lead to like worse things. And he was so bent on being accepted and trying to have a friend group that he did it. And then little by little, he started what once wasn't accepted, he started to do it more and more and more. And it just became his lifestyle. Um, and when we graduated senior year, not, he didn't show any resemblance of the person that he was 3 years ago when he first came into high school. And now, or during that time, that smoking turned into drinking, and drinking leads to many more sins, and uh, especially doing it when you're younger and when you have no idea what you're doing. He was in a dangerous spot, and you just see that the things you would make yourself do just so that you can be accepted and try to survive, if you want to put it that way. And um, so that's the example that I kind of wanted to talk about. So over time, these people get accustomed to doing sinning, to doing the act that they once were against, but now it's common and they accept it. And it's just what the Bible talks about, that in the end times, what's good is going to be called bad, and what's bad is going to be called good. So they now accept that smoking is okay for them, and that people that don't smoke, that they're the ones that are wrong. They're the ones that are not having a good time. They're the ones that don't understand. And, in their eyes, the people that don't smoke and aren't a part of their group, they're the ones that are in the wrong. They're not cool, per se. Um, and another story that I kind of wanted to show, or to share with you guys, was a little bit more personal. So a couple weeks ago, I was hanging out with my cousins in Mexico, and while the time that I was there with them, they tried so hard to want me to go and party with them and take me to one of their clubs. And I kept telling them every time they would bring it up, I don't want to hear it, because you already know that I don't agree with that, and that I'm not accepting that I'm not going to go out and party with you guys. And they told me, okay, we're not going to go there. We're just going to go to this restaurant that they so-called. They said that, I was hungry at the time, and they're like, okay, we're going to go eat at this restaurant. We'll get some tacos, or like dinner plates. And I was like, okay, fine, we'll go. And they wanted to bring their friends along. They play American football, and over there, their friends are the people that are their teammates. So when we go and we pull up to the parking lot, and I see the building there, and already I know that they lied to me, and they were just trying to get me to go out with them. So when we go there, I see that there's the line outside of people waiting to get into what seemed to be like a club. And I didn't really say anything. I just told them, or let's just eat and then let's leave. So then we go, and then we sit down. We meet with their friends. They introduce me to their friends, and we're all sitting around this table in the corner. And I didn't really, when I walked inside, I didn't look around, because I already knew the place that I was in. And I knew that all they wanted to do was have a good time and drink. So when we were at this table and they were talking and we were sharing, I tried to be, I guess you could say, respectful, in the fact that I tried to socialize and talk with their friends. But I was really uncomfortable, and I felt really out of place, because that's not somewhere that I should be. That's not somewhere I should be, and that's not somewhere that any of us should be. So I was, apart from being really uncomfortable and knowing that I'm in the wrong place, uh, when I tried to talk to their friends and I tried to talk to my cousins that were with me, I quickly, I don't know, maybe like 2 minutes of me trying to talk to them, I stopped talking altogether, because I wasn't comfortable, and I was a little bit upset that they took me to this place. And my cousins noticed that I wasn't talking anymore and that I was just on my phone. And while my cousins and their friends they were all drinking their beers, I was just keeping to myself and not really talking to anyone. And my cousins were expecting and hoping that when I was with them, that we would all party, have a good time, and dance, and do whatever it is that they wanted to do. The lifestyle that this world offers, just party and go do things, because you can, just to entertain yourself and to please yourself. And little by little, or once they realized that I stopped talking, I wasn't paying attention to any of them, they started to not talk to their friends. And they started to feel bad. They started to feel guilt that they brought me to this place that I had told them previously that I didn't want to go to. And because of that, they noticed, or once they felt bad and they felt that guilt, they whispered in my ear and they told me, hey, if you want to go, let's go, and we'll just go. We'll go walk around like a shopping mall, and we'll get some dinner and then we'll go home. And I said, okay, let's go now. Like, I'll say my goodbyes to your friends and nice to meet everyone, and then we'll just part our ways. And eventually, yeah. So we left the club, and we went to go eat and have dinner. And they ended up, treating me to the dinner and to a couple desserts that we had, and we just walked around the uh, the shopping center. And they started to talk to me with more, uh, not remorse, but they started to talk to me and treat me like apologetically, because they had realized that, oh wow, we messed up in bringing him out and trying for him to be more like us. And just this story that I share with you all leads me to 1 Peter chapter 3 verses 13 to 16. And the whole point of sharing this with you all is to show you uh, that there's a lot of temptation out there in the world. And if you aren't like firm in your relationship with God, and if you're not like if you don't have a firm foundation, you can easily fall, and you can do things, you can sin and do things that you're going to regret later on. And I tried the whole time to remain faithful to God, and I did. And I made sure that I wasn't compromising any of my beliefs, and I wasn't doing anything that I know is wrong. So I ended up coming out of that whole situation on top, and I didn't sin, I didn't give in to temptation, and I didn't compromise my beliefs, and I remained faithful to God, is what I'm trying to say. So 1 Peter chapter 3, this kind of explains what happens, or what happened in this situation. So it says, "Now who will want to harm you if you are eager to do good? But even if you suffer for doing what is right, God will reward you for it, so don't be worried or afraid of their threats. Instead, you must worship Christ as Lord of your life. And if someone asks about your hope as a believer, always be ready to explain it. But do this in a gentle and respectful way. Keep your conscience clear. Then if people speak against you, they will be ashamed when they see what a good life you live, because you belong to Christ." And this is exactly what I did during this time that I was out with them. I kept my conscience clear, and I remained faithful to God. And they later were ashamed for what they were doing. They were ashamed that they wanted to do these things and go out to club and go out to party. And so yeah, if we remain faithful to God, God is going to remain faithful to us. He's going to bless us, and He'll deal accordingly with the people that wrong you, the people that come after you and try to make you compromise your beliefs and make you do things that you shouldn't be doing. And we see this in the example with Daniel when he was thrown into the lion's den, how God worked in his life and in his favor. And I'll just summarize it so we could understand a little bit more. So Daniel was someone that was really favored by King Darius, and he esteemed him in his eyes, the king. So the king had plans to make Daniel rule over the whole empire, the province. And the other officials that were with Daniel, they were kind of jealous, because they were like, okay, the king is putting his complete faith, and he's trusting this one man, and this one man, Daniel, is going to be above all of us, and he's showing favoritism towards him. So they ended up becoming jealous, and they tried to plot to make something happen so that the king would basically make or arrest Daniel for committing a crime or doing something that wasn't right in the king's eyes. So they try to devise a plan to make sure and try to catch Daniel slipping up, so that they can throw him in prison and get him gone, so that he wouldn't be the main guy anymore. So what they ended up doing is that they made a law and they presented it to King Darius, and the law basically said that no one can pray to God or to any spiritual person if it's not the king himself. So if they said, if you're going to pray, you can only pray to King Darius and no one else. So they presented this to the king, and the king, he was in agreement with what they had proposed to him. So the law went into effect, and Daniel heard, and he knew that the law went into effect. But despite that law being established, he didn't neglect to pray to God. He still said, no, I know what I believe in, and I stand firm in what I believe. I'm going to continue to pray to God and do what I'm supposed to do what I know is right. So one night when he was praying to God, the other officials, they went into his room and they caught him praying, and they arrested him because, the law was already established, so he was breaking the law. And they go to, they arrest him, they take him to the king, and they accuse him. They say he was praying to God, and, the law was already established. And the king had, his hands were tied because the law was established. So he said, okay, I did say anyone that prays other. I did say that anyone that prays to someone that's not me, then I'm gonna punish them. So he ended up throwing him in the den. And since Daniel was faithful to God and he was willing to give his life to stand firm in what he believed in, God ended up blessing him and being in his favor. We all know the story. He came out fine. The lions didn't end up hurting him or scratching him at all. And he came out, and the king saw that Daniel was fine and that God worked in his favor. So then he ended up getting the other officials that were against Daniel, threw them into the den for what they had done, the malicious activities that they did just so that they can get on top, and they ended up perishing. But so Daniel remained faithful and he didn't compromise his beliefs, and God ended up rewarding him. It says that if you read that chapter in Daniel, I believe it's chapter 6. The king, he had an attitude. He was even like, "Oh, what did I do? Like Daniel's like my favorite guy. Like, why would I throw him in the den?" And he sees that he came out unharmed, and he was like, everybody praise the God that Daniel prays to, praise the God that Daniel serves, because he's real and he protected him during this trial. So yeah, I'll just reassure you all that if we remain faithful to God, if we don't compromise our beliefs, God is going to end up blessing us. The people that accuse us and go against us, they're going to be ashamed they're going to be ashamed because they see the good life that we live. And because we live a good life, because we remain faithful to God and do what we're supposed to do, God's going to reward us. He's going to bless us. And in that same chapter, it says that Daniel ended up living a very prosperous life. So the last part for this, the part that I want to leave you all with, or kind of like bring into conclusion, is that God is responsible for our progression in life. As we see these people, these officials that were against Daniel, they try to do these malicious activities and these like dirty politics, you can say, so that they can get on top. And when we do things that are out of our own will and we don't wait on God, there will be consequences. Because when we do that, I think I mentioned it last week, where if we do that and we act out of our own will, we're undermining God's power, and we're just, instead of waiting on him and what his promise says, we're cutting him off and just trying to reach the end goal. Let's see. And this is something that I actually experienced this past week, where situations happened in my life where I tried to take on a bunch more responsibility so I could make up for whatever was lacking. And in doing so, I was acting out of impulse. It was my first instinct to take on way more responsibilities and to try to make up for what was lacking in that area. I hadn't taken my petitions to God. I hadn't taken my situation to God and prayed about it and asked him to take care of it and asked what his will was in it. And when I was sharing what was happening with someone, this person ended up telling me that whatever it is that I'm trying to do right now, that's me taking control of my own life, and that's not letting God take control of it. And then when this person said that, I was stunned, because I realized I realized exactly what this person said, that I was doing what this person had said, where I didn't take my problems to God. I didn't go to him right away. And I tried to fix it all on my own. And, now a couple of days have gone by, and there's a lot more peace in my heart, and peace in I know that God works for our good and that everything's going to turn out fine. So there's no more worry in my life. And, when we give our total trust and our faith to God, he fills us with peace. And as the Bible says, his peace is above all understanding. And when we go about our lives, some people ask us every now and then, friends, coworkers, or family, they ask us, why are you so peaceful amidst, your situation is really bad? Your family member's really sick, for example. How can you be so at peace and content with whatever's going on? And many of the times we can't explain why, because, it's God's peace that fills us. Even though the circumstance seems so completely so gloom and dull and depressing, we still remain happy. We still remain joyful because, God has us. We have God's peace in our hearts. And there's nothing that can explain it, because, it's above all understanding. It surpasses all understanding. So I'm thankful for God that He filled me with that peace, and that we continue to trust in Him, and that He works for our good. So a couple more notes that I have: don't compromise your values to get something you desire, as we see with these people, the officials in the chapter that we just read, or in the verses that we just, or the story of Daniel that I mentioned. They really desired, to be on top, to gain the status, to gain a position and be accepted by everyone, to have power. And because of that, their plan, it seemed to work at first, but God stepped into the situation and He said, no, this isn't the way things are supposed to be done. And they ended up having there were consequences to their decisions. So we have to be careful with that. If there's something, we all know what our heart desires, and we have to be really careful, because the Bible mentions that the heart is deceitful, and what we ought to strive for is knowing God's will for our lives. When we seek His kingdom, we're gonna know more the values that we should have, the qualities that we should apply to our lives, and not what our heart desires, because the world offers so many things. Unfortunately, my family, they like to do those activities, and I continue to pray for their salvation. But the heart, all it wants, and the flesh, it just wants pure pleasure, entertainment, and distraction. So again, don't compromise your values to get something you desire. God will give us everything that we need at the time that we need it. And just a closing remark: if we're focused on chasing our dreams, and we move heaven and earth to achieve that, we do anything we can to achieve those dreams, our own manpower. If we try to do that, then it just shows that our priorities aren't right. If we do that, then we're focusing on earthly things, on things that are only temporary, and we don't see, from a different perspective, we don't see what really matters, and that's seeking God's presence and becoming more like Him, serving Him. So I hope this message was a blessing to you all. God knows exactly what He's doing. This message came again. More situations arose this past week, and then again, I go into this study and I prepare this message and I pray to God, and reading the chapter and going through remembering the experiences that I had and the stories that I shared with you. It all comes in God's perfect plan. He knows exactly what He's doing, and He gives me exactly what I need. I just want to reassure you all that God has a bright future for us all. No matter how grim a situation is, no matter if we don't know what's going to happen in the future, because that's a fear that a lot of us can have, is uncertainty, not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow, not knowing if this test is going to go my way, or if I can get into a car accident, or something is going to happen in the future. The not knowing can be a fear, but what we're called to do is to trust in God and put our complete faith in Him, resting on His word and His promises, knowing that He's going to take care of everything, and that we just obey His commands and continue to praise Him and give it the thanks for the love and the mercy that He shows us each and every single day. So I don't know if anyone has anything to say.